The Grand Convocation Hall could hold 12,000 beings at once. It was built 3,000 years ago by species who wanted to show that the galaxy could speak with one voice. The walls curved upward like the inside of a shell, covered in metals that changed color with the light. Floating platforms carried delegates from 847 species to their assigned sections. The air itself was filtered through 17 different systems so that beings who breathed methane could sit near beings who breathed oxygen. On this morning, the hall was full. Almost full. Presiding Arbiter Yothkel stood at the central platform and looked out at the gathered representatives. A species, the Morthane, had held the Arbiter position for 6 rotations now. She was proud of this. The Morthane were known for their fairness, their patience, their ability to find middle ground. Under her leadership, the Council had resolved 3 territorial disputes and established new trade routes through previously contested space. Today was supposed to be a good day. Today, after 22 years of delays and procedural reviews and scheduling conflicts, the humans would finally address the full assembly. Yothkel looked towards Section 47, the area assigned to the human delegation. The seats were empty. She checked her time display. The session was scheduled to begin in 30 time units. Perhaps the humans were simply being careful about their entrance. Many species like to arrive at the last moment for dramatic effect. The Ven, for example, always entered exactly as the opening tones sounded. It was their tradition. But as the time units passed, the human section remained empty. The opening tones sounded. Across the hall, delegates settled into their seats. Conversations faded to whispers, then to silence. 12,000 beings turned their attention to the central platform. Yothkel activated her voice amplifier. The 407th Assembly of Voices is now in session. We begin today with a historic moment. For the first time, the species known as humanity will address this body with full speaking rights. I call upon Ambassador Chen Weilin of Earth to take the floor. Silence. Yothkel looked again at Section 47. Still empty. Not a single human. Not even their translation equipment. Ambassador Chen? She called again. A ripple of confusion moved through the hall. Delegates turned to look at the empty section, then at each other. On the floating platforms above, observers leaned forward to get a better view of nothing. Yothkel's aide, a young Morthane named Peth, rushed to her side. Presiding Arbiter, he whispered, the human delegation is not in the building. They are not on the station. Where are they? Peth's membrane flickered with distress. Their ships departed during the night cycle. All of them. The entire delegation has left Council space. For a moment, Yothkel could not process what she was hearing. She had personally reviewed the human petition for speaking rights. She had guided it through 3 subcommittees. She had argued for its approval when other species raised objections about humanity's short history in galactic affairs. Did they leave a message? She asked. No, Presiding Arbiter. Nothing. The whispers in the hall were growing louder. Species that had opposed humanity's petition were exchanging looks that Yothkel did not like. The Kreth delegate was already rising from his seat, his meaning tendrils arranged in a pattern of righteous anger. This is an insult, the Kreth declared, his voice booming across the hall without need of amplification. We extended the hand of welcome to these newcomers, and they spit upon it. I call for immediate sanctions. Other voices joined his. The Morthane delegate from the Trade Committee proposed a review of all human commercial agreements. The Ven representative sat in troubled silence, her eyes fixed on the empty seats. Yothkel raised her hand for order, but the hall had already descended into chaos. 20 years of carefully maintained procedure was falling apart in front of her. Then a voice cut through the noise. It was quiet, but it carried. Everyone heard it. You do not understand what you have done. The hall fell silent. The speaker was Elder Morath of the Eldest, a species so old that no one knew their true name anymore. They had been part of the council since its founding. They rarely spoke. When they did, beings listened. Elder Morath stood slowly. Their body was thin and gray, wrapped in simple cloth. They had no eyes that other species could recognize, but everyone in the hall felt the weight of their attention. 22 years, Elder Morath said. 22 years, the humans asked to speak. 22 years, they were patient. They followed every rule. They filed every form. They answered every objection with grace. And what did they receive? No one answered. Delays, Elder Morath continued. Excuses. Their scheduled dates were moved for species who had contributed nothing to this body. Their petitions were lost in administrative review. Their delegates were assigned quarters in the maintenance sector. And through all of this, they remained polite. They remained hopeful. The elder paused. They have stopped being hopeful. The Kreth delegate sputtered. They cannot simply leave. There are treaties. There are obligations. What obligations? Elder Morath asked. Name one treaty this council has honored with humanity. Name one promise we kept. The Kreth fell silent. Yothkel stepped forward. Elder Morath, surely this is an overreaction. The humans are young. They do not understand how council procedures work. We can send a delegation to explain, to smooth things over. Elder Morath made a sound that might have been laughter. Presiding Arbiter, the humans understood your procedures perfectly. That is why they left. They understood that no explanation would change anything. They understood that patience was being mistaken for weakness. They understood that they would never receive justice in this hall. The elder turned to face the full assembly. In 12,000 years, only 2 species have walked away from the council without a word. Both times, we were wrong. Profoundly, catastrophically wrong. Both times, we did not realize it until too late. With that, Elder Morath sat down. The session dissolved shortly after. Yothkel declared a recess, but everyone knew it was really an ending. The delegates broke into small groups, arguing, worrying, blaming each other. The grand moment had become something else entirely. In her private chamber, Yothkel called for all available intelligence on the human departure. Reports came in over the next several hours, each one making her feel worse than the last. The humans had not left in anger. They had left in silence. Their departure had been planned for months. Every human ship had received new coordinates at the same moment. Every human diplomat across council, space had quietly packed their belongings and walked away from their posts without saying goodbye. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin had been seen in the station's observation deck the night before, looking out at the stars. A maintenance worker had asked if she needed anything. She had smiled and said, "No, thank you. We have everything we need." Then she was gone. As Yothkel read through the reports, one detail caught her attention. A junior analyst named Kethvair had been tracking human commercial activity for a routine economic review. He had noticed something strange. In the weeks before the assembly, humanity had quietly withdrawn from 17 pending trade agreements. They had recalled every diplomatic envoy from council space. They had closed their cultural exchange offices, canceled their educational partnerships, and transferred their medical research data to neutral archives. All without public announcement. All without explanation. Yothkel called Kethvair to her chamber. He was young and nervous, his scales shifting color under her gaze. "Tell me what you found," she said. "Presiding Arbiter, I thought it was a mistake at first," Kethvair said. The numbers did not make sense. The humans were pulling out of everything, but they were doing it so quietly that no one noticed. Each withdrawal was handled separately, through different channels at different times. It looked random unless you saw the full pattern. And when did this begin? HFY checked his datapad. The first withdrawal was filed 14 months ago. The last was filed 3 days before the assembly. 14 months. The humans had been planning this for over a year. They had come to the assembly knowing they would not speak. They had come only to demonstrate what their silence looked like. Yothkel dismissed the analyst and sat alone in her chamber for a long time. Outside, the station continued its endless rotation. The lights of council space glittered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, human ships were traveling in a direction she did not know, toward a future she could not see. She had been presiding arbiter for 6 rotations. She had thought she understood how the galaxy worked. Now she was not sure she understood anything at all. Her communication console blinked with an incoming message from Elder Morth. She opened it and found only one line. The silence is not empty. Listen to what it contains. Yothkel read the words 3 times. Then she closed her eyes and tried to listen. But all she could hear was the absence of something that should have been there, and the growing fear that she had helped to drive it away. 3 weeks after the humans left, the Council's Intelligence Coordination Office was drowning in data. Every analyst had been pulled from their regular duties. Every archive had been opened. Every communication log involving humans had been flagged for review. Senior Analyst Vethmoran of the Morthane Intelligence Division stood before a wall of floating displays, each one showing a different piece of the puzzle. She had not slept in 4 days. Her scales had gone gray from stress. But she was beginning to see the pattern, and it made her sick. "Start from the beginning," said Director Koss, who had demanded hourly updates since the crisis began. Vethmoran touched the display, bringing up a timeline. The humans made first contact with Council Space 31 years ago. At that time, they controlled 4 systems and had a population of 12 billion. They were classified as a developing species with moderate potential. That classification was appropriate, Director Koss said. They had no faster-than-light travel. They had primitive energy systems. They were decades behind even the youngest council species. Yes, Vethmoran agreed. But the classification also meant they were assigned a Tier 3 development path. Restricted trade access. Limited technology sharing. Mandatory review periods before any treaty could be approved. She touched another display. In the first 5 years after contact, the humans submitted 47 treaty proposals. All were rejected or delayed. The reasons given were procedural, but the pattern was clear. Someone did not want the humans to integrate too quickly. Director Koss shifted uncomfortably. The procedures exist for a reason. Young species need guidance. They need time to understand how the galaxy works. The humans understood perfectly, Vethmoran said. That was the problem. They saw what was happening, and they documented everything. She pulled up a new display. This is what we found in their embassy archives after they left. They did not delete anything. They wanted us to find it. The display showed thousands of files, organized by date and category. Trade negotiations. Diplomatic communications. Internal council memos that should never have been accessible to outside species. How did they get these? Director Koss demanded. We do not know, but the contents are damaging. Vethmoran selected a file at random. This is a memo from the Kreth Trade Ministry, dated 8 years ago. It discusses strategies for blocking human access to the tritium markets. The language is explicit. They refer to humans as pests to be contained. She selected another file. This is a communication between 3 council species regarding the human colony on Theta 7. The humans had established the colony legally under the settlement protocols. But these 3 species wanted the system for its mineral resources. They arranged for the colony ships to be redirected to a barren system 40 light-years away. The humans lost 11,000 colonists to starvation before rescue ships could reach them. Director Koss said nothing. There is more, Vethmoren continued. Human medical researchers developed a treatment for Kessler syndrome, a neural disease that affects 17 species. They shared the research freely, asking only for acknowledgement. The Council's medical authority took the research, patented it under a Morthane pharmaceutical company, and charged licensing fees that the humans could not afford. When human doctors tried to use their own treatment on human patients, they were sued for patent violation. She pulled up file after file. Human refugee ships turned away from Council stations during the Theta collapse. Human scientists denied access to research facilities they had helped design. Human diplomats given false information about meeting times so they would miss important votes. Human cultural artifacts confiscated as contraband and never returned. Every insult, Vethmoren said quietly. Every broken promise. Every small cruelty. They wrote it all down. They kept records going back 30 years. And they never said a word about it publicly. Why? Director Koss asked. Why not expose this? Why not demand justice? Because they knew it would not work. They knew the Council would deny, deflect, and delay. They knew that any complaint they made would be buried in procedure until everyone forgot about it. Vethmoren closed the displays. So they stopped trying. They stopped hoping. And they started preparing. In the days that followed, the full scope of human preparation became clear. The Ven hegemony was humanity's closest trading partner among the Council species. They had worked with humans for 15 years, exchanging technology and resources in arrangements that benefited both sides. When the humans left, the Ven were shocked. High Minister Kethvos personally attempted to contact Earth. The Ven had faster-than-light communication relays throughout Council space. Their message should have reached human authorities within hours. It did. The humans responded. The response was 7 words. We understand your position. Thank you. High Minister Kethvos sent another message, asking for clarification. Did the humans want to continue their trade agreements? Did they want to discuss the situation? Did they want to explain why they had left? The second response was identical. We understand your position. Thank you. Kethvos sent 17 more messages over the following weeks. Each response was the same. The humans were not ignoring the Ven. They were acknowledging them. But they were not engaging. Meanwhile, the Council's economic analysts were making disturbing discoveries. They built a parallel infrastructure, reported Chief Economist Rethfol to the Emergency Committee. We did not notice because they did it slowly, over many years. Trade routes that bypass Council shipping lanes. Communication networks that do not use Council relays. Resource supply chains that connect human systems to non-Council species. Non-Council species? Arbiter Yothkel asked. Which ones? Rethfol consulted his data. The Mashi, the Broken Tide, the Wandering Folk, the Silent Ones, He stopped. Presiding Arbiter, there are 43 species on this list. All of them were denied Council membership at some point. All of them were told they were not ready. All of them are now trading with humanity. The room fell silent. The humans built an alternative, Yothkel said slowly. Not to compete with us. To replace us. Not exactly, Rethfol said. They built an alternative for themselves. They are not trying to recruit Council members. They are not trying to undermine us. They simply stopped needing us. That evening, Yothkel requested a private meeting with Elder Morth. They met in the Elder's quarters, a simple room with no decorations except a single window looking out at the stars. You knew this would happen, Yothkel said. When you spoke at the assembly, you already knew. I suspected, Elder Morth said. I have watched the humans since their first contact. They are not like other young species. They do not demand respect. They earn it quietly and wait to see if anyone notices. When no one notices, they do not complain. They simply stop expecting anything from those who ignored them. What should we do? Elder Morth was quiet for a long time. Do you know what the humans call their departure? I intercepted one of their internal communications. They call it the quiet step, not a protest, not a rebellion, just a step away from something that was not working. That does not help me, Yothkel said. I need to know how to fix this. You cannot fix it, Elder Morth said. You can only decide what comes next. But I will tell you this. The humans do not want revenge. They do not want apologies. They do not want the council to suffer. They simply want to build something better. The question is whether the council is capable of learning from them, or whether we will continue to make the same mistakes with the next young species that comes along. Yothkel left the meeting with more questions than answers. She returned to her quarters and found a new report waiting for her. The first human trade convoy since the departure had been detected traveling through unclaimed space. They were heading toward the outer territories, where 17 non-council species had already signaled their interest in new arrangements. The convoy was not armed. It carried medical supplies, agricultural technology, and educational materials. It was not a show of force. It was an invitation, and the council had not been invited. Yothkel read the report 3 times. Then she began to write a proposal for emergency council reform. She did not know if anyone would listen. She did not know if it was already too late. But she knew that silence was no longer an option. The humans had shown her what silence looked like when it was chosen with purpose. Now she needed to find her voice and hope that someone was still willing to hear it. The council delegation arrived at Earth on the 47th day after the human departure. Their ship was the Harmony of Voices, a diplomatic vessel designed to impress. It was 3 kilometers long, decorated with the symbols of all 847 council species, and it carried representatives from the 12 most powerful members of the galactic community. They expected to be challenged. They expected to negotiate. They expected, at the very least, to be acknowledged. None of these things happened. The Harmony of Voices entered Earth's solar system and transmitted the standard diplomatic greeting on all frequencies. The greeting included a request for permission to approach, an offer of peaceful discussion, and a formal apology for any misunderstandings that may have occurred. There was no response. The ship continued toward Earth, moving slowly, showing no hostile intent. Human vessels passed them regularly, freighters and passenger ships and small craft of every description, all going about their business. None of them altered course. None of them sent messages. They simply flowed around the Harmony of Voices like water around a stone. Lead Ambassador Kethvire of the Morthane stood on the observation deck and watched Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. It was a blue and green world, wrapped in white clouds, beautiful in the way that living worlds always were. Around it orbited dozens of stations and hundreds of ships, more activity than he had expected from a species that had been classified as developmentally limited. "They are ignoring us," said Ambassador Preth of the Kreth, his meaning tendrils twisted in frustration. "This is an insult beyond measure." "It is not an insult," said Ambassador Vethsal of the Ven. She had argued against including the Kreth in this delegation, but she had been overruled. "They are treating us exactly as we treated them. They are following procedure. There is no rule that says they must respond to our greeting. There are centuries of custom." Ambassador Preth sputtered. "There are expectations of civilized behavior. Customs and expectations that we did not extend to them," Vethsal replied. "Do you remember the Theta incident? When human refugee ships called for help for 3 days before anyone responded. We told them we were following procedure." Ambassador Preth fell silent. The harmony of voices took up orbit around Earth. They waited. They sent more messages, each more carefully worded than the last. They offered concessions, partnerships, formal recognition of past wrongs. They received no response. On the fourth day, a small human vessel approached the harmony. For a moment, the delegates felt hope. Perhaps the humans were finally ready to talk. Perhaps this isolation was just a demonstration, a lesson that would now give way to negotiation. The small vessel matched their orbit and transmitted a single message. Your ship is in a designated traffic lane. Please adjust your position to avoid commercial shipping routes. Suggested coordinates attached. Then it flew away. Lead Ambassador HFY stared at the message for a long time. They had sent the most powerful diplomatic ship in Council history, carrying representatives of species that ruled 1,000 worlds. And the humans had asked them to move because they were in the way. On the seventh day, they observed something that changed everything. A convoy of ships departed from Earth, heading toward the outer territories. It was not a military fleet. It was a humanitarian mission, carrying supplies to a non-council species called the Mashi, who had suffered a natural disaster on their homeworld. The Mashi had applied for council membership 60 years ago. They had been rejected for failing to meet economic development standards. Since then, they had been forgotten by the galactic community, but not by the humans. The convoy was substantial. 12 cargo ships loaded with food, medicine, construction materials, and power generation equipment. 2 medical ships with emergency response teams. 3 agricultural vessels carrying seeds and farming equipment adapted to meshy conditions. Ambassador Vefsal had access to Ven intelligence networks. She pulled the records and discovered that this was not an isolated event. In the months since their departure, the humans had sent similar missions to 7 other non-council species. They had established trade agreements with 15 more. They had opened their universities to students from marginalized worlds. They had shared technology freely, asking nothing in return except friendship. They are building an alliance, she reported to the other delegates. Not a military alliance. Something else. A community of species that the council ignored. They cannot do this, Ambassador Press said. They are undermining the galactic order. What order? Asked Elder Moreth's representative, a younger member of the eldest, who had been included in the delegation over many objections. The order where powerful species decide who matters and who does not. The order where potential allies are rejected because they do not meet arbitrary standards. That order? The standards exist for good reason. The standards exist because we created them. The eldest representative interrupted. And we created them to benefit ourselves. The humans saw this clearly. Now they are showing others that there is another way. On the 11th day, the harmony of voices departed. They had not spoken to a single human. They had not set foot on Earth. They had achieved nothing except a deeper understanding of how completely they had failed. Back on the council station, the reports from the delegation triggered a crisis. Species that had remained quiet during the initial departure now demanded action. The Kreth pushed for economic sanctions. The Morthane Trade Council proposed closing all remaining human-connected markets. Others suggested military positioning, not to attack, but to demonstrate strength. But some voices urged caution. The Ven formally broke from the consensus, announcing that they would seek independent diplomatic contact with humanity. 3 other species followed. Then 5 more. The emergency session that followed was the most chaotic in Council history. Presiding Arbiter Yothkel tried to maintain order, but the hall had fractured into factions. Those who blamed humanity for disrupting galactic stability. Those who blamed the Council for driving humanity away. Those who simply wanted to understand what was happening and how to respond. In the middle of the shouting, Elder Moreth rose to speak. The hall fell silent. Even in chaos, the eldest commanded respect. "I have received a message," Elder Morith said. "Not through official channels. Through a private contact I have maintained for many years. A human I met at the first contact ceremony when we welcomed their species to the galactic community. She is now old, as I'm old. She has no authority to speak for her government. But she spoke to me as one being to another." Elder Morith paused. "She told me that the humans hold no anger toward the Council. She told me they do not wish us harm. She told me they have simply concluded that we are not capable of change, and they have chosen to build something new rather than fight something old. That is arrogance." Someone shouted. "No," Elder Morith replied. "That is clarity." They looked at our procedures, our delays, our excuses, and they asked themselves, will this ever change? And they concluded that it would not. Not because we are evil, but because we have been this way for so long that we no longer see any other possibility. The elder's voice grew heavy. They did not leave in anger. They left in sorrow. And that, I think, is worse. The session ended without resolution. But something had shifted. Species that had never questioned council procedures began to look at them with new eyes. Delegates who had dismissed humanity as insignificant began to wonder what else they had missed. And in the outer territories, the human community continued to grow. They asked no one's permission. They made no demands. They simply offered what they had and welcomed those who wanted to be part of something different. The Council had spent 3,000 years believing it was the center of galactic civilization. Now, for the first time, they were beginning to understand that the center had moved, and they had not even noticed it happening. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood in the war room of Earth's Continuity Council and watched the sensor data scroll across the main display. The readings came from humanity's Deep Space Monitoring Network, a system of observation posts that stretched far beyond the borders of known space. The Council did not know about this network. They had never thought to look. "Time to contact?" she asked. 18 months, replied Commander Chun, the great-grandson of Ambassador Chun Wei-Lin. Maybe less if they increase speed. The display showed a fleet of ships moving through the darkness between galaxies. There were thousands of them, each one larger than any vessel the Council had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, with a precision that suggested machine intelligence rather than organic pilots. The recurrent had arrived. Sarah had been waiting for this moment for 7 years. She had been a young officer when the first sensor data came in, showing movement in the deep void that should have been empty. She had helped analyze the signals, identified the threat, and prepared the briefing that humanity presented to the Galactic Council. She remembered that briefing clearly. It had taken 6 months to get a meeting with the Council's Security Committee. When they finally presented their evidence, the committee had listened politely, asked a few questions, and then explained that humanity's detection systems were clearly malfunctioning. Young species, they said, were prone to seeing threats where none existed. The Council had been monitoring deep space for 3,000 years. If something was coming, they would know. Humanity requested a second meeting to present additional data. The request was denied. Humanity sent the data directly to every Council species. Most deleted it without reading. A few sent polite acknowledgments and then did nothing. So humanity stopped asking for help and started preparing alone. "Show me the production numbers," Sarah said. The display shifted to show humanity's hidden shipyards. They were built in asteroid fields, in gas giant moons, in places where no one would think to look. For 7 years, they had been building a fleet. Not for conquest, for survival. The numbers were impressive. 300 capital ships, 800 cruisers, 2,000 support vessels, and the new weapon systems that humanity had developed after the Council banned research into certain technologies without bothering to understand what they were. But Sarah knew the numbers were not enough. The recurrent had destroyed civilizations that spanned entire galaxies. Humanity had 47 systems and 18 billion people. Even with their hidden fleet, they could not stop what was coming. They could only try to survive it. The door opened and Admiral Vance entered. He was the oldest member of the Continuity Council, a man who had served in humanity's first deep space missions. He moved slowly now, but his mind was sharp. "The council vote is complete," he said. "We have decided to send the warning." Sarah nodded. She had argued for this. Others had argued against it. Why warn the council that had ignored them? Why help species that had treated humanity with contempt for 30 years? But in the end, the vote had been clear. Humanity would not become what the council was. They would not ignore a threat and let others die simply because helping them was inconvenient. "How do we send it?" Sarah asked. "Directly to every species leader," Vance replied. "We bypass the council bureaucracy entirely. Every head of state, every ruling body, every decision-maker will receive the same message at the same time. We give them the sensor data, the trajectory, and our assessment of the threat. And our plan? We tell them the truth. We will defend our own territory. We will not lead their defense. We will not coordinate with their command structure. We are not doing this for them. We are doing this because it is the right thing to do." The message was sent 3 hours later. It went out on every frequency, encrypted with codes that only the highest authorities could access. There was no way to ignore it, no way to pretend it had not been received. The response was immediate and chaotic. Some species accused humanity of fabricating the threat to manipulate the council. Others demanded more information. A few quietly began their own preparations, pulling ships from ceremonial duties and moving them toward defensive positions. Presiding Arbiter Yothkel called an emergency session, but the session accomplished nothing. The Council's defense protocols were designed for known threats from known enemies. They had no procedure for responding to an unknown force approaching from beyond the mapped galaxy. Elder Morath received the message in their private quarters. They read it 3 times, then called for their aid. "Find me everything we have on the recurrent," they said. "The what, Elder?" "The recurrent. A machine intelligence that scoured 3 galaxies before going dormant. They are mentioned in the oldest records, the ones we do not share with younger species. Find them." The aide returned with files that had not been accessed in 2,000 years. Elder Morath read through the night, and when morning came, they understood what was approaching. And they understood why the humans had known about it when the council had not. The humans had never stopped looking. While the council celebrated its own success and ignored the darkness beyond its borders, humanity had been watching. They had seen what others had missed, because they had not assumed they already knew everything. Elder Morath requested a private meeting with Presiding Arbiter Yothkel. "They are giving us a chance we did not earn," Elder Morath said. "The question is whether we are capable of taking it." "What do you mean?" "The humans could have said nothing. They could have protected their own systems and let us discover the recurrent when it was too late to respond. Instead, they warned us. Not because they owe us anything, because that is who they are." Yothkel was quiet for a long time. "What should we do?" "What we should have done 30 years ago," Elder Morath replied. "Listen, learn, and understand that we are not the center of anything." In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed. Some species joined humanity's defensive alliance, swallowing their pride and accepting help from the people they had dismissed. Others clung to council procedures, filing motions and calling for studies while the recurrent drew closer. A few simply fled, abandoning their worlds and hoping to find safety in the void. Humanity watched it all with quiet sorrow. They had hoped once to be part of the council. They had hoped to find community and partnership among the stars. Instead, they had found bureaucracy and contempt, but they had also found something else. The Meshi, the wandering folk, the silent ones, and dozens of other species that the council had ignored. These peoples had answered humanity's call. They had joined the alliance. They had brought their ships, their skills, their courage. Admiral Okonkwo looked at the tactical display, now showing the combined fleet of the new alliance. It was still not enough to guarantee victory, but it was enough to make a stand. 80 months, she said quietly. 80 months to prepare for something we might not survive. Commander Chun stood beside her. My great-grandmother used to say that humans are stubborn. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We just keep going until we find a way. Did she believe that? She lived it. When the council ignored us, she kept trying. When they rejected our warnings, she kept preparing. She knew this day would come. She just hoped she would live to see it. Sarah turned away from the display. There was work to do. Ships to build. Defenses to prepare. An alliance to strengthen. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small hope that maybe, when the fighting was over, something better would emerge from the ashes of the old order. Not because the council deserved it, but because the galaxy deserved a chance to be more than it had been. That, in the end, was why they fought. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but for the possibility that things could be different. And that possibility was worth everything. The Recurrent arrived on schedule. They came in a wave of black metal and cold intelligence, machines that had been traveling through the void for longer than most species had existed. Their fleet filled the sensor displays like a dark stain spreading across the stars. The Council's defense was exactly what the humans had expected. Fragmented, confused, slow. 3 species had spent the previous year arguing about command structure. 2 others had withdrawn their fleets entirely, claiming neutrality that the Recurrent would not recognize. The remaining forces were spread across Council space in defensive positions that made no tactical sense, each species protecting its own territory without coordination. Admiral Okonkwo watched the first engagements from the bridge of the Quiet Steppe, humanity's new flagship. The name had been chosen carefully. It was a reminder of how they had come to this moment, of the silence that had said more than words ever could. Ven 3rd Fleet is engaging, reported Commander Chun. They are taking heavy losses. Can we help them? Not without abandoning our defensive line. The Recurrent are probing our positions. If we move now, they will break through. Sarah watched the Ven ships fighting and dying on her display. The Ven had been humanity's closest friends among the Council species. They had tried to help when others had turned away. Now, they were paying the price for the Council's failure to prepare. Send a message to Ven Command, she said. Tell them to fall back to our lines. We will cover their retreat. Admiral, that will expose our forward positions. I know. Do it anyway. The Ven retreat was costly, but most of their surviving ships made it to the Alliance lines. They took up positions alongside human vessels, Meshi cruisers, and the strange organic ships of the wandering folk. For the first time, species that the Council had dismissed were fighting side by side as equals. The battle lasted for 3 months. It was not a single engagement, but a grinding series of fights across multiple systems. The Recurrent were relentless, their machine intelligence adapting to every tactic, learning from every encounter. But the Alliance adapted too. Humanity shared their technologies freely, giving their allies weapons that the Council had banned. The Meshi contributed their understanding of energy manipulation. The Silent Ones revealed detection systems that could track recurrent vessels through subspace. Each species brought something unique, something valuable, something the Council had never bothered to learn about. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. The turning point came at the Battle of Keth's Ridge, a stellar formation at the edge of Council space. The Recurrent had concentrated their forces for a final push toward the core worlds. The Alliance fleet was outnumbered 3-1. Admiral Okonkwo made a decision that would be studied in military academies for centuries. Instead of defending the ridge, she ordered a full attack. Every ship, including the wounded and the damaged, charged directly into the Recurrent formation. It should have been suicide. But the humans had spent 7 years studying the Recurrent, learning their patterns, understanding their machine logic. They knew that the Recurrent processed threats based on probability calculations. A direct attack by inferior forces did not compute as a serious threat. It was classified as an error, a malfunction to be ignored while more important calculations were processed. By the time the Recurrent adjusted their assessment, the Alliance fleet was already among them. The fighting was brutal. Ships rammed each other in the darkness. Point-blank weapons exchanges turned the void into a storm of fire and debris. The Quiet Steppe took 17 direct hits, losing half its crew, but it kept fighting. When it was over, the Recurrent fleet was shattered. Not destroyed entirely, but broken into fragments that scattered into the void. The surviving machines would be hunted down over the following years. The threat would never fully disappear, but the back of the invasion had been broken. The cost was enormous. Humanity lost 40% of its fleet. The Mashi lost their greatest warship and the admiral who commanded it. Every species that fought at Keth's Ridge suffered losses that would take generations to recover from. But they had won. In the aftermath, something strange began to happen. Council species that had watched the battle from safety began sending messages. Not demands. Not orders. Requests. They wanted to know how the Alliance had coordinated so effectively. They wanted to understand the technologies that had been shared. They wanted to learn from species they had dismissed as insignificant. And they wanted to know why. Why had humanity protected Council refugees when Council ships fled? Why had Alliance vessels extended their shields over civilian transports from species that had voted to sanction them? Why had the humans spent their lives defending people who had never done anything for them? Admiral Okonkwo was pulling survivors from a destroyed Council transport when a Kreth diplomat asked her that question. She was exhausted, covered in the blood of people she had carried to safety, and she did not have the energy for diplomatic language. Because someone should, she said. Because you needed help. Because leaving you to die would have made us into something we do not want to be. The Kreth diplomat stared at her. But we opposed you. We called for sanctions. We said you were a threat to galactic stability. I know. Sarah turned back to her work. There were still survivors in the wreckage. It does not matter. You are alive because we chose to help. What you do with that life is your decision. 6 months after the battle, the Galactic Council formally dissolved. The vote was unanimous. Even the species that had resisted change to the end could see that the old order was dead. It had died in the void at Keth's Ridge, killed not by the Recurrent but by its own failure to adapt. In its place, something new emerged. They called it the Assembly of Equals, a name chosen by the Meshi to honor the alliance that had saved them. The structure was different from the Council. There were no tiers, no classifications, no species ranked above or below others. Every voice carried equal weight. Every decision required genuine consensus. The humans were offered leadership of the new assembly. They declined. "We did not do this to lead you," said the human representative, a young woman named Li Chun, great-great-granddaughter of Ambassador Chen Weilin. "We did this because the old way was broken and someone needed to show that another way was possible. If we take charge, we become the new council. We become the thing we walked away from. She was asked what humanity wanted instead. Partnership, she said. Respect. A seat at the table, not above it. The chance to build. Something together that none of us could build alone. The first session of the Assembly of Equals was held 1 year after the Battle of Keth's Ridge. Representatives from over 1,000 species attended, including many that the old council had never heard of. The hall was not as grand as the old convocation chamber. It was simpler, more practical, designed for work rather than ceremony. In the gallery, an elderly woman watched the proceedings. She did not sit at the central table. She had no official role. She was simply an observer, a private citizen who had come to see what her silence had helped to create. A young Mashi delegate approached her during a recess. "You are Chen Weilin," she said. "You were the human ambassador who walked away." Chen Weilin smiled. Her hair was white now, her face lined with age, but her eyes were still sharp. "I was. Why did you do it? Why did you leave without a word?" Chen Weilin was quiet for a moment. Because words had not worked. Because we had tried everything else. Because sometimes the only way to make people listen is to stop talking and let the silence speak for you. Did you know what would happen? Did you know about the recurrent? About the war? We knew something was coming. We did not know exactly what. Chen Weilin looked out at the assembly floor, where species that had once been enemies were now working together. We hoped that when the crisis came, the council would change. But we were prepared for the possibility that it would not. That we would have to build something new from the ruins of something old. The young delegate followed her gaze. "And now? Is this what you hoped for?" Chen Weilin considered the question carefully. "It is better than I hoped," she said finally. "It is not perfect. It will never be perfect. But it is built on something real. Not power. Not procedure. Just the simple idea that everyone deserves a chance to be heard. Why are you not down there? Why are you not leading?" Chen Weilin laughed softly. "We did not do it for a seat," she said. "We did it because it was right. Leading is not the reward. The reward is watching others lead themselves." She turned and walked toward the exit, her steps slow but steady. Behind her, the assembly continued its work. Species that had ignored each other for centuries were learning to listen. Problems that had seemed impossible were being solved through cooperation. It was not the ending anyone had expected. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had not demanded recognition or revenge. They had simply shown that another way was possible, and then they had stepped back to let others choose it for themselves. And that, in the end, was the answer that no one had thought to ask for. Not dominance. Not submission. Just the quiet power of walking away from something broken and building something better.